May this year, the Secretariat of the Advisory Committee on the Framework Convention for the Protection of National Minorities published the fact sheet Environmental Challenges in National Minorities. The short document highlights some of the Advisory Committee's core findings and recommendations on environmental issues. Interestingly, it builds on the first strategy on the environment, which the Council of Europe adopted in May. My name is Ljubica Đorđević, and in this episode of ECMI Conversations with Experts, I want to shed light on the Advisory Committee's work on environmental issues. I have the privilege of speaking with Mikko Pumalainen, a member of the Advisory Committee from 2020 to 2024, and its vice chair from 2020 to 2022. Mikko has worked as a Deputy Chancellor of Justice of Finland since 2007, and before that served as the Ombudsman for Ethnic Minorities and Foreigners. Really impressive. You're a constitutional lawyer with your background, as all the Romans would say, simile simile gaudet. I'm very happy to have a constitutional lawyer here in our conversation with expert, with great experience in advisory committee work, which I would like to address today in the aspect of environmental issues. So Mikko, very warm welcome. And as a start, I would like you to explain the rationale behind the Council of Europe interest in environmental issues, and more specifically, the work of the advisory committee in this field. How come that environment and national minorities go into attract attention of the advisory committee when we know that there is no specific article in Framework Convention on environment per se. So welcome again, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. Maybe the approach or the questions concerning the relationship between national minorities and indigenous peoples and environment, it's quite recent in the work of the advisory committee. The background is the notion of the seriousness of the climate crisis, and also not only the climate crisis but also the nature loss, and sort of the realization that they concern all people and societies. The International Court of Justice has mentioned in its recent opinions that the environment is the foundation for human life, and the protection of the environment is a precondition for the enjoyment of human rights. And it is, I think, only logical to think that the climate crisis and the natural loss have also effects on national minorities and indigenous peoples. Actually, it has been referred in the Paris Agreement clearly that the climate change is a common concern of humankind, and the parties should, when taking action to address climate change, respect, among others, the rights of indigenous peoples. So it is sort of it flows from this general concern and the general development that we should also take note of the climate crisis and the natural loss effects to minorities. On one hand, the effects are similar than to the majority population, but in addition to that, and due to the minority status, these effects may be even more particular to the minorities. So that from this perspective, the committee has taken also care of monitoring the work of the authorities and the contracting states vis-a-vis in protection of minority rights in relation to the environmental problems.
And as you might know, I originally come from Serbia, where now the issue of mining has attracted attention of the UN Environment and Minority Rapporteurs, and mining operations are affecting one Vlah village in eastern Serbia. And this is yet another example of the tension between economic growth environmental hazards related to it, and the protection of minority culture. So in this case, the claim is that individual resettlement would lead to the loss of the community's compact settlement and thus its culture and tradition. And then the villagers claim for a collective resettlement to protect their traditional way of life and also their culture, so their group element. And this reminded me of a well-known example, the resettlement of Sorbian villages in eastern Germany for lignite mining, which has been prominent in advisory committee's opinion on Germany for several monitoring cycles. Can you explain a bit about the advisory committee position in this case and also in similar cases to it?
Well, the example concerning the report of Germany and the example you mentioned, actually it's a good example of the relationship between the minority rights and the environmental problems, and more particularly it brings to our attention the relationship between green transition measures and minority rights. In this example, the German government, as a part of the green transition policy, planned to close the lignite mine, and these effects of this closure were seen to be negative in the short perspective from the point of view of minority communities. But superficially, it seemed that there is a clash between environmental issues, or the sort of the protection of environmental interests, and the national minority rights. But this is only a superficial notion, because the committee's approach, it underlined that even this, as a result of this closure of the mining, in the Lusatia region, it will lose the important economic factor, employer, and possibly even more population. But however, from the perspective of minority protection, the officials or the authorities, they should, in other compensatory measures, ensure that the families, they can stay and remain in the region and carry out the Sorbian heritage and language into the future. So the committee was in a way taking a different approach. They were not treating the environmental protection and the minority rights as a contrary or the opposite to each other, but they were bringing to the attention of the authorities that it is possible to close the mine, but still keep up the local minority culture. But this requires measures or the actions by the authorities in order to reach this result.
Yeah, it's interesting because also for me as a minority lawyer or scholar in lawyer, in terms that I'm not an expert in environmental issues, as I mentioned, I'm more interested in advisory committee work, and in that sense, it's very interesting how advisory committee has used the possibilities of Article 5, which is protection of minority culture, and Article 15, which is participation of national minorities, also in socioeconomic issues, to somehow streamline and to highlight the importance of protection of minority culture and their participation also in environmental issues. And that brings really this example of Sorbs in Lusatia as one of the striking examples, which we can also find elsewhere in Europe and recently also in Serbia, which I'm sure will come in some of the next opinions of the advisory committee. Another segment or aspect which I want to tackle with you is unfortunate situation that some minority groups, particularly Roma, face disproportional exposure to environmental hazards. And that has been in Albania, Montenegro, several other countries, member states to the Framework Convention. How have you addressed this in your work in advisory committee?
We have indeed we have paid attention to this phenomenon, and especially from the perspective of Article 15 of the convention, and especially from the point of view of right to the adequate housing. It has been part of the very uh, difficult situation of Roma people in many of the contracting states, that their housing circumstances are not adequate, and this has sort of been underlined by also the environmental from the environmental perspective, because their housing circumstances they have been inadequate, but they have become also dangerous, even for their life and health, because of the climate change. Especially, there are some areas like riverbanks where the flooding has, due to the climate change, has increased considerably, and it has very clear and even effects that are threatening their life. Also, due to the neglect of the waste handling, many of the Roma communities are living in the very dangerous circumstances in the landfills areas or wastelands, and this has become even more dangerous to the environmental changes. This has been raised in some of our opinions, like you mentioned, in the opinion of Albania and also Romania.
Yeah, and it's interesting of following or seeing how the advisory committee work has developed over years and monitoring cycles. It's interesting how several issues have starting appearing under Article 15, and as you mentioned, right, or access to housing, but not housing whatsoever, but really some housing that adequate housing, how is it mentioned, and which secure also dignified living conditions. And now back a bit to your region, where the biggest indigenous group lives in Europe, the Sami. This is also one interesting aspect of minority environmental protection, and this is the question of environmental threats on minority economic activities. And the typical examples are Sami fishing and reindeer herding, where through these economic developments and also climate change, they got under threat and risk, and which affects both economic development and prospect for the minority, but also their preservation of their culture. So what is your experience in this respect?
Well, it's not by accident that in our fact sheet, the cover page is a picture of a Sami person. Um, as you probably know, the global warming is accelerating most rapidly in the northern areas. The speed is about 4 times compared to, for instance, in other areas in Central Europe or even in more south. So the effects are very dramatic. And it's concerning Sami. It's not the climate change is not just threatening their economic interest or their economic rights, but it's also a question of social and above all cultural and language rights. And in concerning Sami, it's interesting to note that the language and for instance reindeer herding, which is their traditional way of life, they are very interlinked. The Sami, what they say is that if there's no reindeer herding or traditional fishing, the vocabulary in the Sami language diminishes dramatically. The language is so linked, and it's so part of the also of the traditional way of their life. This has been noted by in our opinions in concerning Norway, Sweden, and most recently Finland. So we are sharing in the northern area the same problems. And it is not just the warming which makes the fishing, traditional fishing, more difficult, or the reindeer herding more difficult, but it is also the green tradition poses new challenges to the traditional way of life. For instance, the reindeer herding is difficult in the areas where there are wind farms. They also make the traditional hunting more difficult, and the noise and the visual impact of the reindeer herding affect also the of these windfalls is detrimental. So there are many aspects concerning the Sami rights, which the environmental sort of deterioration effects. One example still, in Finland, there is a very important river which is flowing between Sweden, Norway, and Finland, and it has been an area of traditional salmon fishing. And now there has been a ban for, I think it's a third year in a row, because of the loss of the fish in the river.
Mm.
And there has been this has resulted to also to the situation where the Sami people cannot fish anymore traditionally, and they cannot pass this tradition to the younger generations, and they are really concerned now that there will be loss of this important part of their culture due to the disclosure of the fishing.
Yeah, interesting how some things which we don't immediately link to minorities actually have an effect on minority culture and identity. I would like to conclude this conversation with the question about what has advisory committee mostly, or what were the usual recommendations of the advisory committee in respect of an environment, in terms of what the advisory committee has seen as possible and desirable action by the authorities. So what in the view of advisory committee, what can the states do to somehow mitigate these challenges of environment or climate change and environmental hazards to protect minorities?
Well, so far we have discussed about the sort of the substantive rights, the right to adequate housing, or the right to culture, and the right to language. But if I would sort of summarize the even the most important message of the committee, and that is the participation. That is the Article 15. That the participation of those people, minorities, indigenous people, whose interests, rights, and status are at stake, and that is something which we have encountered in very many respects in our work in the committee, that the authorities, they have to engage those whose interests are at stake to the decision making at the most early stage, if possible, in an open manner, well informed, and also respecting the views of the minorities concerned. And this is something which we have underlined a lot. Um, and it is not just asking or providing the possibility to express the views. It is also it is also a legal obligation, and that it has to be regulated. And very often, and also in my regular work as a deputy chancellor of justice, I have underlined the need to respect the right to be consulted and the right to be part of the decision making process. Um, that is something which we really strongly have underlined in our practice.
And how do you assess? And from your experience, how do states react to this? Not only recommendations, but do you observe some kind of change, positive change with states when it comes to this awareness of the need to protect minorities when it comes to environmental impact? Or art is still the interest for economic growth and this, let's say, more economic driven approach dominant? Or how where are we with the economical awareness and sensitivity when it comes to authorities in Europe?
Well, the more there are economic interests, the more there is also temptation to neglect this participation aspect. Um, but there has been positive developments. For instance, in my country, the responsibility of the authorities to consult the Sami was recently strengthened in our legislation, and once there is a clear responsibility, it is also more easy to monitor the implementation of that responsibility. But from our perspective, I would also like to underline that the minorities, they should also organize themselves, and they should build their capacity to be part of this decision making process, and and also they should build allies. They should seek allies in their activities, and in environmental questions there are natural allies, I would say. There are environmental organizations, NGOs, pressure groups, etc., who could also whose agenda is in many ways similar to the national minorities agendas. And for instance, in my country, the Sami activists and the environmental activists, they have worked quite a lot together, and they have reached good results in protecting the environment in the north.
Yeah, well, that's a very good message to conclude this conversation. Indeed, minorities should not stand behind or stand aside, but should really organize and, when necessary, ask for support from monitoring bodies, as many of them also do, and approach either UN rapporteurs or through different shadow reports, the advisory committee or other bodies. So it's the minority activism is also very important in empowering minorities also in this important aspect of environmental challenges. So, Miko, is there anything you would like to add for the
Well,
end?
actually, inspired what you said, the last, um, I should add as a former member of the committee, that also the monitoring work of the committee is a way of participate or engage the minorities. As you know, the monitoring visits are very we openly and with in a confidential dialogue with the interlocutors, we give them, and we get them, we get a possibility to have a open discussion of their situation, and we have a method to, through our opinions, to bring their views to the European awareness.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Miko, for your time and for this very inspiring conversation. I invite you all to take a look at the fact sheet, which you can find on the website of the Council of Europe Advisory Committee for the Framework Convention. And at the same time, you can follow the work of our equality and inclusion cluster, which specifically deals with socioeconomic participation of national minorities. And also, please follow us on social media, because we aim to protect the war, or to promote the work of monitoring bodies, first of all, of advisory committee, but also of the committee of experts under language charter, with the aim to support the multilateral attempts to protect minority rights in Europe. So thank you very much, and happy holiday season. So all the best, and again, it was really a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much, and also my wishes for the season as well.